And we are live, totally uncensored. I am here, Mike Robles, with my special guest today and a good friend, Al Martin. Al Martin is not only a comedian, he's also an author and a club owner. And I just got your new book, Al. I don't know if you can see it right there.
Yeah, there it is.
It is
And
Get It On It There. How I built
stand-up
the
comedy
comedy
too.
empire in 30 short years. That's all it took, 30
Yeah,
short
just,
years, right
just
now?
30 years.
Let me ask you, so how does it feel to carry that title? New York City
Which,
King of Comedy. You are the King of Comedy, Al Martin.
well, there's a lot of king of comedies, I guess, but Friedman would have the claim to that one, in my opinion. But on the East Coast, I'll take it.
Yeah, no, you are because you're the first to do a lot of things. But let's go back to the beginning when we first met a long time ago at the New York Comedy Club, right? I read the
That's
book.
right.
I thought it was a great story. I didn't know how you got involved with the New York Comedy Club. It had to do with
That's
the
right.
cancellation at Hula Hands, right?
That's right. We were doing a show, and we were all scheduled with your old pal Tim Davis. Remember Tim?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So we did the show, and we got canceled with about an hour's notice, and I had to find a second place. I went running down the street. Tim was on the phone at a payphone waiting to hear from me because there were no cell phones back then. And I went up and down Second Avenue. Finally found that place on Second Avenue on the second floor. It was vacant that night, and we moved the. I called them. Anybody you got? This is the address. Send them there. And we wound up pulling off the show that night with about 60 customers. And the owner of the bar said to me afterwards, "Hey Al, if you want to do this, please come back next week." And we did. We packed the room again, and we were there at that location for 5 years.
And that was the beginning of the Al Martin Empire, right?
That's right. It started right there, totally
So
by accident.
that's crazy. So yeah, so you went from like it was basically you were doing the comedy room, right, at Hula Hands,
Yeah, one night a week.
and then the
And
next
then
day,
and the guy was so happy. We added a Friday. Then we went to two shows, Friday and Saturday. Then I approached this guy, Seymour Swan. I said, let's do an African American comedy show too at late night on a Saturday.
right.
And it took off. And then, a couple of years later, I met Ozzy Baez. And then that's when we went to Latino Laughter. We started with that. And we did a college night on Thursday with Chris Mazzilli at the time, who was working with me. And it took off from there. We did Sunday night improv with Ian Pryor, if you remember him,
Right.
and Monday was open mic, and we
And
did a
from there you took it then to East 24th Street location, right?
yeah. What happened was you know one day I came in and I got a letter addressed
Right.
to New York Comedy Club. I opened it up and it said you haven't paid your rent in 6 months. Back then, what I did was I paid the rent to the bar owner downstairs who had the whole lease, and we worked off his uh, lease, in his location. And what happened was that uh, he wasn't taking my money and his money and giving it to the landlord. He was just taking my money. So
Wow.
the landlord threw us out of there, and I had to
Eh,
start running and looking for a new location again. And we wound up finding the place on 24th Street.
and you did. And what I want to know is like here's little Al Martin in the New York Comedy Club, right? And you're going up against the biggest comedy clubs in New York, right? Stand up, comic strip, Caroline's, Comedy Cellar. How did you compete, stay in the game?
It was, you know what? I'll tell you what it was. It was willingness to take on different types of shows that the established clubs weren't willing to do. The comic strip had their audience, the improv had their audience, Catch a Rising Star had their audience. So I had to think a little bit out of the box. One day I was hanging around with a couple of new comics at the bar, and they said to me, "Al, look, we know we can't crack this lineup with Bill Hicks and with Brett Butler and Louis C.K. and that variety of comics. But what can we do to get on stage? If we brought an audience, this is what they said to me. If we brought an audience on an off hour, would you do a show with us? And I said, yeah, and that was, the Strip wasn't willing to do that. Catch a Rising Star wasn't willing to do that. And I was like, I was like Fidel Castro in the mountains, and Batista. He didn't want to deal with the guys in the mountains. I was the guy in the mountains. I took any business I could get, and that's what it was. And we really got the ball rolling. And about 2 years later, when we wound up on 24th Street, I had a street team that was doing it for me, but they also did it for the comic strip and the improv. And back then, the street teams didn't go to Times Square. What they did is they went to the office buildings, and they would go up to the top floor and work their way down and sell tickets to the receptionists. So they didn't do a very good job for me, because when I asked them, why are you filling the improv and catch and comic strip, but you're not bringing anybody into my club? And they said, well, if we make your ticket cheaper, nobody's going to be interested in selling the ticket because it's less money. But at the same price, they're going to go to the club that they heard of. Well, one day, two guys walk into my club, Emerson Moncoute and Mark Wiggingham, and they said, look, we've been going from club to club, and they're all rejecting us. We have this new idea of putting guys into Times Square. Would you mind if we started selling your tickets in Times Square?
Huh?
So, boom, I said, yeah. And the next thing you know, we were controlling Times Square because we were the only club in there that was being sold to tourists and office workers and stuff. So they figured out a whole new distribution thing. So if you have to look at the three things to answer your question,
Mm-hmm.
one was the new talent showcases. We did them before anybody else. Two,
Yeah.
selling the tickets in Times Square. And three was the advent of the Latino laughter, African American comedy. Those three things combined put New York Comedy Club big time on the map.
Which leads me to this here, where you have in a book, one of your chapters says, the comedy world stole all my ideas.
Well, yeah, because it's funny. I was at the Montreal Comedy Festival um, one year. I think it was 94, 93, and I'm there at the festival, and they had a panel discussion. It was Bud Friedman and a few other guys, and Carrie Hoffman. It was a Q&A. Carrie Hoffman stood up and asked the question. Well, there's this little club in my city, meaning us, that is doing Latino and African American comedy shows. What do you think about it? Now, at the time, Bud Friedman said, well, all comedy shows are the same, homogenous. There should not be any difference between the regular shows, and there shouldn't be a niche comedy. And so they held firm to that for a lot of years. But now there's probably not a comedy club in the country that you don't go to that doesn't have chocolate sundaes,
Right.
So, yeah,
Now,
they stole that idea.
so you created, right? Am I wrong? You created bringer shows, right?
Yeah, I'm blamed for that. I did. And, a lot of people say, Mike, that it's exploitive. And I make the argument that, listen, let's say you took away every bringer show in existence overnight. You snapped your finger, no more bringer shows.
Mhm.
Do you think most of these guys are going to make the 9 o'clock lineup at most comedy clubs anyway? No.
Right.
So what we do is, for those that can bring an audience, it helps us as club owners to be able to pay the bills, but it also gives the people that can bring an audience an opportunity to get up on a stage in front of an actual audience. So, listen, are there bringer shows that are exploitive? Some are. Like, I never liked the theory of one guy bringing in 90% of the audience and then the producer puts them up last.
Right.
I don't believe in that. I also believe that what I did in those days was if a person brought a certain amount of guests, I would give them some money back, so they'd actually get paid as well. So, or they'd get a video of their performance. So, those were the things that I kind of did. Um, that was very helpful to the new comics, but it's not for everybody. But there are so many ways, Mike, that these young comics we've created through the years for them to get on stage. We were the first to do interns. So now someone can come in, see people for a couple of hours a night, and then they get the stage time. Now, again, people say, "Oh, that's exploiting your comic." Yeah, all right. So I'll hire someone to do it, and then all the great comics that came through my intern program, guys like Ricky Velez, guys like Mike Machete, Pete Coriali, who all started as interns, Sam Morrell, they wouldn't have gotten, as much quality. Gary Greenberg, who's now writing, head writer at the Jimmy Kimmel Show. These
Right.
guys all got their start at you know, interning. So interning, selling tickets, barking. I did that myself, and that's another way that people were able to make guys that you probably don't know because they came in the New York circuit later on. Guys like Alan Fuchs and people like that who were incredible ticket sellers in Times Square wound up getting their start making money selling tickets and um, and getting their stage time. Produce shows. We were the first one to do that. You never saw produced shows of any kind. Everything was a house show. At Dangerfields or the Comic Strip or Catch. They didn't let someone just produce a show at 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock. Now the dirty secret is most of these comedy clubs. That's all they do. They do a combination of bringers on a show and they do new talent to bring an audience to fill it in. Like Caroline's on a Monday or Tuesday or even on a Wednesday will do these new talent shows, and they put a couple of pros on them, and they disguise it that way. If I'm getting a little dark, it's because I'm on my terrace, and it's starting to get nightfall in New York. But yeah, so it's those things that people accuse me live TV, but it's those things that people accuse me of that have really provided a lot of opportunities for people as well.
Right. And you also created theme shows, right? I don't think the New York comedy scene, they weren't doing
No, they
theme
never
shows.
did that. They never did a Latino show. New York's top African American comics. We did gay shows. It's a funny thing. I had a great gay show producer who she went on to incredible success, doing shows all over the country. And she once said to me, "Al, we have to stop doing the gay shows at New York Comedy Club." I go, "Why?" She goes, "Well, a lot of gay people are complaining that why give the business to a straight guy? Let's give it to a fellow gay owned venue." Which I should have just pulled out my kid's card and said, "Hey, my kid is gay. He's an owner of the club. So, but
Well,
yeah, we invented the gay show. We did variety shows, where singers. We did a poetry reading night. I listen. The old thing. I just threw shit against the wall and see what would stick.
well, a lot of it sucked, man. A lot of it sucked because you're doing well.
Thank
Let me
you.
ask you now. I have, I'm out in Texas now. There's a lot of comedians from San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, and all over the country, but they're heading to New York City, to find that stage time, that dream, that chasing. What advice can you give these new comedians who are heading to New York City? What should they expect when they hit the Big Apple?
Well, whether it's L.A. or whether it's New York, wherever you're coming from, make sure to have your act in place, ready to rock and roll. Okay, don't come to New York, and decide you want to come to New York and you're going to start at the open mic level because you're going to put in another 5 years. So develop your act wherever you are. Develop it, then go to the two big hubs, as I call them, LA or New York, and do your thing. And through word of mouth, we'll find out about you. Now with the internet, YouTube. I'm constantly watch. That's my job now. I just look for, get a link, watch for the good talent, and then reach out to them to perform at my venue.
And what do you look for when you're looking for like new talent?
Well, here's the thing. A lot of the club owners, they look for someone that could potentially be on a sitcom. My thing has always been, I'm not in the sitcom producing business. I'm in the making my audience laugh business. That's what I do,
Right.
and I'll admit to it. So when some guy has worked a 40, 50 hour week and he comes to my club and orders a beer and some wings or mozzarella sticks or whatever, he wants to laugh. He's not there for that experimental comic that's going to, try to work out his material. He wants to laugh. That's what he's spending his or she's spending her hard-earned money on. So we try to, I have a thing at Broadway Comedy Club. Between the bar and the showroom, there are two concrete walls. If I can hear someone making the room laugh in the bar, two concrete walls away, I don't even have to see what you're doing on stage. You're a winner as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Right. Now, what is some of Al Martin's pet peeves? I know you have a few, Al, about
Oh yeah,
comedians that drive you crazy.
drives me crazy. First of all, be a professional. If you got a 9:20 spot, don't show up at 9:19. Don't show up where I got to start looking down 53rd Street and see if you're out there anywhere because
Yeah.
it's a minute till you go up on stage. So, basically, get there with sufficient time, 10, 15 minutes before you spot, and check in, which
Right.
leads me to number two. Okay, number two is, when you come in, don't check in with the MC and then get lost for 20 minutes, and then we can't find you. We got to scramble all over the place. Where is this person? you
Right.
know. Number three, when you come into the room and you see the bartender busy making drinks, don't come walking over and say, "Can I get a Diet Coke now?" Or number four, I got a lot of these, right? Yeah. Number
Keep going.
four,
They need to hear this. They need to hear
yeah.
this.
Number four, okay. Don't come into the room and say I'm here, I'm ready to go up, and then just as the MC is ready to announce, you say, "Oh, I got to run to the bathroom." Take care of your take care of your bathroom way in advance,
Yeah,
And I'll give you number five too. Don't take my $100 microphone or whatever and start banging yourself on the head with it, and breaking it, So so those are the five biggies.
you left one out. You left one out. I was waiting to hear it.
Uh, don't
Res-
block the waitresses. That's how we make our money.
That's very important. How about respect the light?
Respect the light. Don't get me started on that one. Respect the light, especially in New York, because
Right,
Mike, the comics go from spot to spot. You know that. A lot of
right,
people might know. No, we don't have the in New York the typical MC middle headliner. We
right,
have 4 or 5 acts doing 20 minutes apiece, and
right,
they're running from club to club to club to club. So if you do an extra 5 minutes on stage because you want to get off on a laugh, you know, you're screwing up someone else's time behind you. Now, also, don't come in so late that we have to put someone else up and then you're going to go after that act because the problem there is the shows are crafted in a certain way to maximize each comic's contribution. For instance, one night I had Todd Barry booked and behind him, I had Keith Robinson. Are you familiar with both of those comics?
of course, yeah.
Yeah, Todd is a very easygoing comic. Very low style on stage, a little bit low energy, but very clever stuff. And Keith Robinson, he pounds the crap out of the audience. He's
Right.
just belly laugh after belly laugh. So one day, Keith Robinson comes in and says, "Look, Al, I got another spot right after this. I have to rush. I have to rush. I don't have time. Get me up first, and then Todd can go after me." And he finagled it where he did that. He
Okay.
wound up crushing, as he always does. Now, the audience level is all the way up here with, Keith Robinson's high energy. And
Right.
now Todd Barry, with his low energy, has to follow the guy,
So,
which wasn't fair to Todd Barry because on his own he's a great comedian,
right.
but it screwed up his entire set. So the the kicker to the whole thing is Keith Robinson comes off stage and he starts talking to a girl for 20 minutes. And I walked
Ah,
over to him. I said, I thought you were in a hurry to get out of here. That's why you finagled to go up before Todd.
yeah.
And he goes, oh, I found out the spot's a little delayed. So, so that's a definite pet peeve.
Yeah, I've seen that so many times. Yeah, can I go ahead of you? I got a spot, and the next thing you know, they're gabbing away and
Yeah.
getting
And it's
compliments how funny they were for the next 30 minutes, and I'm like, you shouldn't even be here.
exactly. What are you doing to me here?
Oh my god. Hey, let me ask you. There's more and more people. I guess more now. Everybody wants to be a comedian these days, Al. So you have more and
Yeah.
more
Oh, yeah.
open mics going on. What is the open mic scene like in New York City these
Well,
days?
New York's open mic scene is bursting through the roof. I mean, it's gotten to the point now we're doing open mics in the afternoon. Like, I'm not talking five
What?
o'clock.
Really?
I'm talking there's 1 o'clock, there's 3 o'clock, there's 5 o'clock. Open mics going on all over the place. So people are, yeah, and they're
At 1 o'clock? Really?
1 o'clock in the afternoon because
Holy
New
smoke!
York, you can get away with it in New York because New York's sort of a 24-hour town. So, you know, um, you know, there are people working overnights. They can't come. So, or they're working a night job. So they come in the afternoon to work out their material. So,
Okay.
yeah, open mics now, 1 o'clock, Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon. People don't care. They do an open mic at any time.
Well, and are these guys, are they taking it serious, or is it like, because when me and you started, we were pretty serious about what we were doing. If we had to
Well,
hang out for 2 hours, we'd hang out for 2 hours. But these
well,
days,
there is some entitlement. Some of these people, they want to, they don't want to pay the dues. And it's a lot of times the older comics. A lot of times you get a guy or a gal that starts at 35 or 40. You know, they don't have the time. They usually have a day job. They don't have the time to stay till 2 in the morning. So they get very impatient
uh,
and they give it up. But comedy doesn't know or care whether you have a day job, whether you have a wife, or whether you have a kid, which
right,
kind of brings me to that golden rule that the way you're
mhm,
going to succeed best in comedy is to um, travel light. No wife, no kids. I can't tell you how many comics' marriages get broken up because they're
true.
traveling on the road or they're. So when I started, the good thing is I really had nothing going on socially. So comedy, I was able to really, you know, devote myself to comedy, and it wasn't until I was established years later that I said, okay, now I can go and look for someone to be in a relationship with. But comedy
Mhm.
is all consuming when you start out, and if you think that comedy is going to wait for you, because your kids need a babysitter that night and your wife wants to go out or something like that. It
Mhm.
doesn't work that way. It doesn't care that you live on upstate New York and there's only one open mic a week. You got to figure out a way to get stage time. So
All right.
it's a tough baby being a stand-up comic. It's not easy.
And especially like you said, if you're in a relationship, I mean, as cruel as that sounds, comedy is like that other woman, it's like that other person. And
Yeah,
I hate to say it. I remember a comedian once asked me, "Hey man, what I got to do to be successful?" So on and so forth, more or less like that. I said, "Well, it depends. There's different levels of success. I
right.
said, if you really want to make it to the top, you might have to divorce your wife, leave your wife.
Yeah,
Are you willing to do
yeah.
that?" And they looked at me like, "What are you talking about?" I'm just saying.
You're right. I
You know.
listen, Mike. I had a guy at an open mic. He once came over to me, and he said to me, "Hey Al, let me ask you a question. I really think that I'm really. No, I asked him, how are you doing? And he goes, Oh, Al, I can't tell you. I'm so happy. I got a great wife. I inherited a great business from my dad.
Mhm.
Things are going good. I got my health. Everything's. I mean, I got great kids. He goes,
Right.
what do I need to do to make it? I said, get rid of all that shit,
Right.
because you're not hungry enough to make it. You got to be that guy living in your parents' basement and hate it. You got to be that girl that's working in a job you can't stand, and you want to get out of it. You want to make it as a career. It's all consuming.
No, it is. It's sad, but that's comedy, man. If you really, 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 really want it, there's going to be sacrifices that have to be made.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
for
it's just a
sure.
little wake up call for people, just in case if you really, really want to get serious about it. There will be sacrifices. It's not like and you stand up, and the next thing you know, everything is put on a silver platter. There's going to be a
I'm gonna
lot
put
of
on my
sacrifices there.
flashlight. I'm gonna put on my flashlight and see if it kind of lights up things a little bit here.
Oh my God! Look, it looks like that movie. What's it called? Yeah, look who's back. Al Martin's back, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, there we go. I'm back. And
Hey,
note to self: do not do a show again on the terrace because it gets dark.
I know you're looking good now. You're looking good. So yeah, so back to this open mic thing because, like I said, as far as the difference between now and then and so forth. What is one of your golden rules you have as far as open mic? Is it's more than just showing up and doing a set, right? What else should they be doing while
Well,
they're there at the open mic scene?
the great part of open mics, which people don't take or are able to work with enough, is the social aspect of open mics.
Mm-hmm.
You do open mics. Like I did open mics with Judah Friedlander, Seymour Swan, um, uh, Sarah Silverman was an open micer, Chris Murphy. And every one of those people later on in my life contributed in one way or another. Seymour Swan, we wound up partnering up, and he did that African American show at the club. Ozzy Baez was, doing open mics, and he wound up doing the Latino show. Chris Murphy became a very good friend and a very close friend of mine, and he did, he helped bring a lot of acts over from the Improv in
Mm-hmm.
the early years because he was a shift manager at the Improv, and he brought over Brett Butler. He brought over Mike Sweeney. He brought a lot of people over, Liz Winstead, um, Mike Royce, and he brought a lot of these people over, and they wound up making a big difference in our lineups and the respect that we got as a club. So if I can say anything to open micers,
Mm-hmm.
be social, and because you'll find out where are the other open mics. Back then as an open micer, I befriended one open micer who said, there's a really cool place on Sunday nights called Shooting Stars, which you're very familiar with
Yeah,
from
Yonkers, yeah.
in Westchester. Frank
Mm-hmm.
D'Amico, remember? Chips Cooney, all those
John,
guys.
John Saliano, there was, yeah,
Yeah, Skip
yeah.
Palmer. And so
Yeah.
Skip, I got to meet Skip at their open mic on Sundays, and he wound up putting me up at Dangerfields. So that's my first experience over at Dangerfields.
Right.
And Chips Cooney to this day I talk to. As a matter of fact, I'm having lunch with him tomorrow locally
Chips
out here.
Cooney.
We both got a lot of time on our hands. So
Little Chips Cooney. You mentioned Sarah Silverman. I know she's in the book. You want to tell your Sarah Silverman story?
We opened mic together, but it wasn't exactly a positive experience a few years later, uh, because she actually accused me of paying female comics less than male comics. Now, Mike, you work in New York. Can
Right.
anybody get away with us paying a comic less than another comic on a main show? Basically, what that was a complete misunderstanding. One night, again, Todd Barry is in the story. Todd Barry comes into the club to do a regularly scheduled paid spot. And Sarah Silverman's a good friend of his, was hanging out with him. And Sarah saw the audience was explosive that night. And she said to me, Al, would you mind if I do a few minutes on stage? And, it was a guest spot. So I said, if you want to, fine. And I was happy because she was just getting some heat on SNL. And I thought it would be a nice treat for the audience. And, she wound up performing. So she gets off stage. She meets Todd Barry in front of the club. They start talking. And all of a sudden, she comes storming back in and goes, Al, and I decided to give her some cab fare, $10 for cab fare. And it wasn't obligated to, it was a guest spot. She came back and she goes, why'd you pay Todd $50 and you paid me 10? And I said,
Wow.
well, first of all, that, He had a paid spot. You had a guest spot. I wasn't under any obligation to give you anything. You asked to go up. It's like asking someone to give you a job. It's crazy. So she held that against me. We had a big fight there. She held it against me for 15 years. All of a sudden, she does an interview with this thing called Salon, which is some kind of website or magazine of some sort. And the topic they were talking about was the wage gap, how women get paid less than men. And she goes, I'm going to tell you a little interesting story about the wage gap. I did this little club in New York, and she started trashing me.
Right.
All of a sudden, my phone is lighting up, and I'm getting these text messages. Did you hear what Sarah Silverman said about you? Blah, blah, blah. So I listened to it. I was horrified, and I wound up making my own little video on my iPhone, and I put it out on the Broadway Comedy Club and New York Comedy Club websites and Facebook pages. The next thing I know, people picked up on it. It wound up going viral. There were like 250,000 views on this thing. And, I kept emphasizing it was a guest spot. As a matter of fact, we wound up making T-shirts called Guest Spot,
Okay.
And I was interviewed by a bunch of magazines, a bunch of TV talk shows, radio shows. The next thing I know, Good Morning America calls me, and they want to do an interview. So I did the interview with Good Morning America. Now, Sarah was getting trashed online. I mean, the support that came out from me, I thank everybody to this day, was incredible. And they were all supportive of me. And they must have, Good Morning America must have called her people and said, look, we got this interview we did with this wage gap story. And do you want to comment on it? Because we're going to air tomorrow. So her people must have gotten totally panicked because I had two people that were witnesses. One of them was Chris Murphy, that came to my defense and said, hey, listen, what she said didn't happen, And Todd Barry remained silent on the whole thing. He never talked about it. And she knew she was in trouble, and she wound up issuing an apology the next morning before the Good Morning America thing even aired.
Okay.
So Good Morning America moved into its online version, and I never aired on the show, but she wound up apologizing for it. And, we haven't spoken since then, but,
Now, this happened at
don't
the New York
screw with a
Comedy
guy
Club.
from Brooklyn.
That's right. That's right. You're from Brooklyn, right?
I'm from Brooklyn, man. I'm not going to sit there and take a lie against me, a slanderous thing against me, laying down,
And that's what I like about you, because I know as a club owner and as a friend, you would sit there in front, and it could be, I don't know, an open mic walking through the door, or it could be, I don't know, Damon Wayans walking through the door. It didn't phase you. If either one bothered you with the attitude, you would probably say something.
Yeah, that's why I get in trouble all the time. I just don't have patience for nonsense. But to those,
Was there like a big celebrity that walked through the door that just rubbed you the wrong way? You said, I don't like this. I don't like this guy, but
Jim Gaffigan used to rub me the wrong way for whatever reason.
Jim Gaffigan, really?
Yeah, Jim.
He's so quiet. He's from the Midwest. Why would he rub you the wrong way?
He's got an anger to him. He's got a little bit of an anger on him. Right now he's going through personal things in his life, but there was a time one night. You remember a guy named Brad Trackman?
Oh yeah, little Brad Trackman. Mm-hmm.
Brad Trackman. Well, he was managing a couple of nights for me at the club, and one night after he closed New York Comedy Club, he went down to the Comedy Cellar just to watch more comedy. He was starting out, and he wanted to be like a sponge and get as much experience and knowledge by watching those great comedians over there. And like 1:30 in the morning, he's like sitting on the side, and Gaffigan gets on stage and sees him and says, you work at New York Comedy Club for Al Martin, don't you? Yeah. And then he goes into a 10-minute tirade against me, Jim Gaffigan, from the stage. So, we had a little history with stuff. The problem with Jim was that, you see Jim Gaffigan now as a great comic, but when he started out, he was still learning his craft like anybody else. And he felt he was ready for prime time a little bit before I thought he was ready,
Right.
Now, apparently I was wrong on that because the Cellar was putting him up late night. I still didn't pass him. But as a club owner, sometimes you make that mistake. Sometimes you look at someone and say, "Not my cup of tea,"
Right.
but other clubs might find them interesting, and they go to stardom, and they remember that you didn't put them on early on. But that's part of being a club owner. You make some good calls and you make some bad calls.
Right. Now, do you have a relationship with him today, or pretty much you don't talk with him?
We don't really talk much, If he wants to work on material in front of a packed audience, he's more than welcome to come over anytime. But he could probably do that at any club that doesn't have a bad relation. The great thing about Broadway Comedy Club, and it probably won't be that way now for a while because of tourism, is Broadway Comedy Club being in Times Square got a great cross section of America. You got people from the South, you got people from New York. It was a very good tourist club.
It's right on 53rd Street and what? Give them the address. 53rd and what? 8th, right?
53rd and 8th. So if you wanted to go out there and work on an act that's going to play all across the country, there's no better audience to try it with than at Broadway Comedy Club because they're mostly tourists and are. Like I said, the dirty secret is there's only 4 or 5 clubs in Manhattan that on their 9 o'clock show is putting up all pros.
Right.
That's Broadway Comedy Club, Greenwich Village Comedy Club, um, the Comic Strip, the Comedy Cellar, and maybe 1 or 2 others, but most of them do a mixture of people bringing an audience and pros. It's not purely a professional show. Broadway Comedy Club, our 9 o'clock at 10:30 show is virtually all pros. We don't, we might put up an intern here or there that's earned their way, and we want to give them a shot, and we'll let the audience know that. But generally speaking, it's, all pros all the time.
Yeah. I remember doing a set there for Comedy Time because you taped the Comedy Time series out of there.
That's right.
And I remember being there, and the audience was a mix of people from the Bronx, Canada, and Sweden.
Right. Yeah, exactly. They
It was beautiful.
all over the country. So, you had all sorts of people. And that's why comics love it, because if you're getting like a guy like, and in the early days when we opened up Broadway Comedy Club, Jim Gaffigan, he was there every single night. He used that stage to hone what he was going to take on the road. I mean, listen, you can't take that away from him. The man knows his market, knows his niche. He's very funny with what he does, and you can't argue with the success that he's had. But I like a different kind of comic. I like him a little more edgy. I'm an edgy kind of comic guy, not a.
Well, name some. Who are some of the edgy ones that you like?
Well,
maybe that we know, or maybe that we don't know.
I loved Sam Kinison. I loved, Andrew Dice Clay. Even though he's not super edgy, I love Kevin James. I love whatever Larry David does on TV. I love. He's out there.
How about you? Remember Otto and George? I don't know how many people remember.
I loved Otto and George. Listen, I'll never forget the time. I don't often go into the showroom to watch acts because if you've booked them and watched enough comedy shows, there's no comics you really want to watch.
Right.
Well, one day I was tired. I grabbed a beer after a busy Saturday night, and I sat in the back, and Otto got on stage. And I literally was on the floor laughing. He had me laughing so bad. And of course, nobody in the audience was laughing. Otto was one of those comics, may rest in peace, that the audience either loved him that night or hated him, but the comics all loved him. I mean, he was just the comics. He was the classic comics comic.
Yeah, Otto. He was a ventriloquist. I'm sorry.
Bob Levy. Bob Levy.
Yeah, Bob Levy's another. Yeah.
Bob Levy kills me anytime he's on stage. I love watching him. Artie Lang, I like watching. Guys like that make me laugh.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I was never the. Do you ever wonder? The guy who's going to go into a. I'm not into that.
So you're not into Jerry Seinfeld then?
Yeah, but you know what? And I'll say taste sometimes changes. Sometimes I watch Jerry Seinfeld and I say that's a pretty clever thing he just said. So
Well, I'm with you on
Maybe
the
I'm opening up.
I'm with the edgy. I mean, I like all comedy. You do too, but I like the edgy stuff. Something that like kind of shocks me a little bit. So I'm
Yeah,
with you on that one.
yeah, I love the edgy stuff. I love the edgy. Listen, you know, he was a one-liner guy, but I loved Rodney Dangerfield. That guy killed me. I mean,
Oh yeah,
he was a funny motherfucker, but off stage, he was a salty guy.
yeah, he was. But talk about edgy comedians. Being that you're in New York now, would you say New York comics are edgier than LA comics?
Oh, much, much, in my opinion, much
Mhm.
edgier. You know, you get an LA, you get a comic from New York here who does really well, and they generally can do pretty well in LA. But sometimes I get LA comics coming to New York, and it's like white bread, in a city that likes pumpernickel, hero bread, all sorts of bread.
Right.
It's like white rice in a city that likes fried rice or something. It's just I find LA comics don't always have that flavor that makes New York work.
Missing some spice.
They don't always bring the heat.
The heat. Oh, look at that! I like that. You got to bring the heat, right?
You got to bring the heat.
That's good. If you coming to New York, bring the heat, right?
Bring the heat. Open it up a little bit. Don't be worried about. And that's another thing I hate: political correctness. I
Oh,
don't like political correctness. That's a cancer on our business. It will destroy this business if we allow it to go unchecked. I think that a comedy club should not be a safe space for people, but it should be a safe space for comedians.
I
If
agree.
you're going to be insulted by anything, don't go to a comedy club. Just don't go.
Right. You've had
You
people
know.
show up to your club to complain, right, about stuff like that.
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. Take a look at our Yelp reviews all the time.
I think I think you responded to one on Facebook. She wrote you a letter about I don't know what she was upset about, and you gave her the lowdown on as far as how comedy works, right?
Yeah, yeah. Excuse me. There's a fire going on in
Yeah.
my town, so
Mm.
they're calling all the fire people. Yeah, I will respond to those kind of customers all the time, and I basically, here's a classic example. We had a comic on stage once, Steve Marshall. Now, Steve Marshall, he's just his slogan is "Don't behave." So he walks on a stage and he'll just go after everybody. Well, I had this audience member come to me once and say, "Oh, I liked all the comics on the show, but Steve Marshall, he talked about autism, and I have a nephew that's autistic, and I really didn't appreciate it, and blah blah blah." And I said, "Well, I have a nephew that's autistic. What does that have to do with what he's talking about on stage? I mean, he's making light of a situation that involved somebody that happened to be autistic, but he also talked about Jews. He talked about Italians. He talked about blacks. He's an equal opportunity offender. So if you're
Yeah.
gonna, take that kind of position, don't go to a comedy club. Somebody, when you have 200 people in the room, five comics, each telling a couple of hundred jokes or 100 jokes in a 20-minute set, something is gonna set off somebody. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't be perfect record. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, hopefully that won't get carried away because comedians now they're even afraid to go do sets, or especially be filmed. People film acts now and put them on YouTube, by the way. And the next thing you know, comedians were being judged
look,
and this
you
and that.
know,
It sucks.
look, this whole cancel culture is ridiculous because look at Ellen DeGeneres, right? What's the complaint about her that I'm hearing? That she's not nice to people?
Mm,
So she's not nice. There are a lot of
right,
people that are not nice. She
right.
should lose her TV show because she's not nice. Then don't go on her show.
It's ridiculous.
Don't be a part of it if that's what it is. I mean, you know what you're getting into, and some people make the argument, "Well, I went there. I didn't know she was going to be nasty." So what? She's nasty. Get a backbone. You were on Ellen, so you should be happy. You got
Yeah.
exposure, right?
There's always complaining. Whether it's you, I remember I used to get complaints the same way. Oh, Mike Roberts this. And I used to say, you know what? I'm here to get results. I'm not here to make friends.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you want to make nice to everybody, fine, but
Because
listen.
at the end of the day, if they get rid of it's your name and your face that's on the line, not these producers, right?
That's right. And like I said, with Ellen DeGeneres, so she's not a nice person. Who cares how she is? I don't care. Is she funny? Is her? I don't watch her show. I never found it entertaining to me.
Mhm.
But if someone likes her, why should they stop watching her because some guest was insulted that they didn't kiss their ass, or maybe there weren't two bottled waters at room temperature in the green room. I mean, who cares?
Ridiculous. All I know is she cares about elephants, and that's good. That's good by me, man. She loves
Right.
elephants. Hey, Al, no, let me ask you. So now you got the Broadway Comedy Club, and now you have also the Greenwich Comedy Club, right?
Greenwich Village Comedy Club on McDougal Street.
That's two comedy
Yeah.
clubs.
So in 2014,
Mhm.
I sold New York Comedy Club to a couple of guys that were working for me at the time. And the main reason, there were a couple of reasons. One, I had this crazy neighbor over there that was calling the police on me every night. She hated my guts. I was so focused on Greenwich Village Comedy Club, which I opened in 2012, and it was on McDougal Street, a really busy block. The club took off and was an incredible success. Broadway was an incredible success. And I guess the success of Broadway took away from a little bit from New York Comedy Club. It just didn't have the location. It was over on the east side in the 20s, and it was hard to get those tourists to get over there when they had a choice of going to 53rd and 8th. And then for a while, the Laugh Factory opened up on 42nd and 8th. And so, the business became very centered in either Times Square or McDougal Street. So I took the opportunity and I sold me, and plus I ran out of kids. I had one kid at Greenwich and one kid at Broadway.
Right.
So I didn't really have anybody left to run New York. And so it was at that time that I made the very hard decision to sell something that was a part of my life for 25 years.
And now that you have two clubs going on, and with this pandemic crisis in New York, how is that affecting you now?
Oh, it's been
You're
brutal.
getting hit twice now. You got two comedy
It's
clubs
brutal. I'm doing this show tonight, right?
now.
No,
Oh,
I do this show anytime. But the thing is that yeah, I don't know. The governor and the mayor here have some kind of crazy. You know, this morning it was in the paper that De Blasio apparently said we're not opening up indoor dining in New York until there's a vaccine. Now, are you
mm,
kidding? I
mm.
mean, you know, do you
Come on.
think there'll be any restaurants? He goes, and in the interview, he goes, well, we're opening restaurants for outdoor dining in June of 2021. Yeah, really? So what's that restaurant going to do in November, December, January,
Right,
February, March, and April? When April it's 50 degrees sometimes in New York, you're not going to be eating outdoors.
right.
So, you think there's going to be any restaurants open in this city in 6 months?
Well,
No,
do you have a reopening date plans for the comedy clubs?
no. We were supposed to reopen in phase 4, which would have been somewhere around early August. And at the last moment, the governor announced that he'll open phase 4 all over the state, but not in New York for whatever reason. Then New York finally met all of the metrics that the governor was looking for, and there's still been no announcement on indoor dining or indoor entertainment. And as far as those two are concerned, as of right now, they're on record of saying indoor dining and indoor entertainment is closed indefinitely. So it's like, how do I make plans for my life? If I was 42, I'd have one thing in life, but now I'm 62. Like, do I start thinking about retiring, or do I hold on until they make some kind of decision in 2 years when there's a vaccine? I don't know what to do. And there's a lot of
Right.
people like me. And I think right now a bunch of restaurants have gotten together and they're filing a lawsuit against the city and the state. And I think the Restaurant Alliance is thinking about joining that suit because it's really kind of gotten out of hand. I mean, you have two people that are making a decision, and I can understand the decision if there was some kind of reason to say we can't do this, but in Westchester they're allowed to have indoor dining, and Long Island they're allowed to have indoor dining at
Right.
reduced capacity. So how can you sit there and tell me you don't want to open indoor dining in New York City because there are droplets of air that go through the air, and go through the air conditioning system and are recirculated. But that doesn't happen in Westchester or in Long Island or
Right.
upstate New York. And what about an airplane? Could you think of anything unhealthier to get on
Yeah.
than an airplane with recirculated air? I mean, you can disinfect that airplane all day long. If some asymptomatic person gets on there, and people don't always behave that great on an airplane. The lights go out, they pull down their mask for a second to breathe.
Mhm.
I mean, you could get exposed to a lot of stuff on an airplane, an airline terminal, Grand Central Terminal. Listen, you can sit there and disinfect the New York City subways all day long. You get some homeless guy that comes in, you
Mhm.
don't know what he has. He's not, socially distancing or wearing a mask all the time. I mean,
It's
so I don't
amazing
get
that
it.
it's amazing. It's the biggest cities like New York is shut down, LA is shut down, and then I'll tell you right now, all the comedy clubs in Texas are open. 50% capacity. You have to wear a mask. They do all the guideline rules, and so far so good. Thank God nothing's
Which
happened.
leads me to believe there's a good chance that this all might disappear right after election day.
I hope you're
Because
right.
it
I hope
sounds
you're right.
sort of a little political to me, doesn't it? I mean,
It does. That's what I'm saying. The biggest cities like New York, LA, shut down, and then you have Texas, which is also big, but they're operating the comedy clubs.
and then half of Florida is open, the other half is reduced capacity. Listen, there are some things I don't see being able to open in a long time, like
Mhm.
bars where single people hang out on top of each other and they're talking to each other, or when you're shoulder to shoulder watching a football game. That's one thing. But you come to a comedy club that if my room seats 160 people and you let me open up 40 seats, I'm pretty sure I can get people 6 feet away from each other. You
Mhm.
know, we can disinfect the room like any other business does. We can have hand sanitizers all over the place, plexiglass. We have protocols in place to protect the comedians. So why don't I get an opportunity to open like other businesses? Bowling alleys. You're telling me that's you're sticking your fingers in a bowling ball that's been used by 20 other people, or you're putting your feet in a shoe that
Oh God,
somebody
yeah,
else wore.
you're right.
That's health. And the air conditioning system, you think they're spending a lot of money on air conditioning filtration systems and bowling alleys? I mean, come on. The whole
That's
thing's
true.
crazy.
Well, it seems like the whole new thing now, Al, is Zoom shows. Zoom. What do you feel about Zoom shows? I'll tell you what I feel. I don't like them, but what do you think?
Well, listen, if you're a comic and you're used to hearing laughs, Zoom is useless. I mean, you can't. It's like you're performing in. It's like you and I doing the jokes right now. We don't know
Right,
if they're working or not,
right.
and I don't see anybody going to get rich on Zoom shows. I mean, you know, will technology improve on those things where they can get audience feedback and allow the
Mhm.
audience to laugh? Maybe. But I think these are all band aids for when the clubs actually can open up again. And, call me a dinosaur or old school, but if you can, you know, if a comic could be doing 30 Zoom shows a month, the second those clubs open up, you think anybody's going on Zoom anymore? I mean, there might be some uses, but really, Mike, we've known about this technology. It's maybe a lot better now with bandwidth improvements and stuff, but it was called streaming. Now, the idea you could do a show from Broadway Comedy Club and send that signal out to areas of the country that might not be big enough to support stand-up comedy, their own club, like mountainous areas or very rural areas that don't
Right. The
have
dark spots.
density to have a club,
Mhm.
then they might pay $5 on a Saturday to get comedy live from New York and see some of the top acts in town.
Mhm.
Or you take a Thursday and you take a big act and give them a good deal like an Andrew Dice Clay, and they can perform in front of your live audience. They're getting the feedback, but you also can send that signal out all over, and the comic gets an opportunity to make a nice amount of money because if you can get 1,000 people at $30 or $25 or $20 a head to watch your show, I mean, you do the math. Plus the live audience on a Thursday, it could be
Yeah,
good money.
true. Well, for my final question now for the evening is this: do you believe that stand-up comedy will ever go back to what it was once this pandemic is over, or has stand-up changed forever?
No, I think we're going to go back. I think, people want to get out of the house already. If you look at the demographic for comedy clubs, it's generally early 20s to early 40s. I mean, there are people in their 50s that go to comedy clubs, they're, in 40s too, but the heaviest demographic are the demographic of people that are not that concerned as much about COVID because they recover from it very quickly if they got it.
Mhm.
And most young people probably, if they tested a lot, would find they have the antibodies and have had it already. I mean, so I think what's eventually going to happen if they don't figure out a vaccine or medical things that can make you feel better once you get it, then a decision has to be made at some point that we have to start opening up the economy. There's not going to be an economy to go back to. First of all,
Right.
you've got a big cliff that we just went. People just lost $600 a week. That extra money they were getting on their unemployment, but they don't have a job to go back to. So what's going
Right.
to happen here? Rents aren't going to get paid. If rents don't get paid, the landlords can't pay their mortgages or their taxes. There's going to be defaults all over the place. This economy is going to collapse entirely. So they got to start thinking of ways to open up. Maybe the decision has to belong to individuals. If you're a person that has a lot of underlying conditions, then stay home. Don't go out. You know,
Right.
make that choice. Make that choice. If you decide to go out, wear a mask, wear the goggles. Wear gloves if it makes you feel better. But you can't shut down the whole world. It's getting to a point. And listen, I'm in that high risk group. I got high blood pressure. I'm overweight. I'm 62. You know, I'm very careful what I do. I mean, I have to be. But you know, if you want to have a world to go back to, you got to start opening up soon. This is not sustainable
Right. Well, hopefully this
unless we
will
all want to
all.
live off the land.
No, I'm not gonna go off the land. I want to
Yeah,
be able to go back to the Broadway Comedy Club and do some comedy. How's that?
that's what we should be doing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully that'll all change and we'll be able to go back to the clubs and laugh like the good old days. And so tell everybody if they want to reach you, especially comedians, they want to reach you with tapes or this advice. Can they
Nah,
reach
don't
you at
tell them
all?
that. No.
Well, first of
Tapes.
all, I would say read the book here,
Right.
right
Get it
here.
on a dare. How I Built a Comedy Empire in 30 Short Years, available on Amazon. If you want to reach me, you can reach me on the websites, Broadway Comedy Club at gmail.com. You can reach me at Broadway Comedy Club or Greenwich Village website.
Mhm.
You can message me on Facebook Messenger. There's a million ways to get a hold of people nowadays. And don't send a tape. I don't have a VCR.
There you
Send
go.
a link. A link.
A link, a link. And by the way, I read the book. I'm almost done with it now. It's a great book, man. It took me down
Thank you,
memory
man.
lane. I really, really enjoyed it.
People say it's a really good, quick read, and it's not complicated. And I think if you're in the business, you got to read this book
It
because
is, yeah.
it's the best investment you'll make in your career. There are books out there that tell you how to write a joke, how to do a joke. This is telling you the angles, how to really get ahead, the
Right.
way to get ahead from a club owner, and that's invaluable advice.
And that's what you comedians got to learn. It's more than just being funny, but you got to know the shortcuts. You got to know the business end, and you put that in there. You
Yeah,
know how
you
you,
got to know how to hustle. You got to know how to hustle.
exactly.
All these books tell you how to write a joke, how to construct a joke, how to do this. Yeah, all right, great. Now you did all that. How are you going to get ahead?
Yeah.
This book will teach you how to get ahead. Will teach you how to hustle, how to get stage time.
Al Martin, that is why they call you the New York City King of Comedy, my friend. It was great
Thank you.
catching up with you, Al. I really, it was great talking to you. And hopefully, when this is all over, I'll be able to go back to New York and we can talk face to face. Have a cigar.
I hope so, buddy. I hope so.
All right. You take care, Al.
Thanks, Mike. I'm
Thanks
going to
for
go
tuning in.
dark again.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
All right. Love you, man. Take care.
All right. Love you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.